Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
Here we are after the weekend. We haven't spoken to each other for like 3 days, maybe 2, maybe just 2.
It's just really been like 2 days. We are here live in the Octopus Lounge.
Yes.
A little different location for us. I hope you're enjoying the underwater theme. And welcome to the show.
We are here to share insights about polyamory as a catalyst for personal growth, expand cultural definitions of love, marriage, and divorce, and give you permission to choose your own path and help you feel less alone.
That's right. And as we always say, please remember that the content in this podcast reflects only our own perspective and our own opinions. We all have separate realities, don't we? And our partners all have their own individual experiences. Anything said here does not reflect their opinions, only our own. With that, let's get started.
Yes.
So we had a question last week, and she was curious about different relationship formats in poly. And this question, it really resonated with us because one of the reasons we started this podcast was to explain to people just how many different relationship formats you could have on poly. And really the number is infinite, right? There's no way we could cover it.
Right.
This isn't how to do poly. There are so many ways to do poly. And today we're going to share with you maybe 4 or 5 different ways that poly has looked for us.
The other thing I want to add to that is that not only is there not one way to do poly, but that there's not one way that we are doing poly forever, right? The reason why we're going to share different formats is because every relationship or non-relationship, like there's so many different phases that we are going through as we evolve. And one of the things I love about poly is that it meets me where I am.
Beautiful.
Like it grows with me. And so oftentimes how I describe poly is like, if you think of an arc of 180 degrees, at 1 degree is monogamy. And then from degree 2 to 180 is everything that's non-monogamous. But it's not a spectrum of, I'm at degree 5 and now I'm at 50 and I'm going to shoot for 100 degrees. That's not what it is. It's a spectrum that you can go back and forth on,
Right.
Including, by the way, going back to monogamy at some point,
Of course.
in a polyamorous relationship. So everything's on the table all the time and I just get to choose what's right for me in that moment. And of course, with the person or people that I'm involved with.
Excellent. And that reminds me too, that a big part of what we're talking about today is helping anyone who's listening feel okay about their poly format. If you feel safe, if you are not abandoning yourself, if you are respecting yourself, then your poly format is great. And it's really easy to say, well, am I sure I'm doing it right? I recently gone through this with a friend who was like, this just feels so weird, right? Are you sure this is okay? Right. And we've been through this for months, actually. And that's not surprising because most of our life, we've been taught it is supposed to be like this for literally 42 years for me. So it's really easy to say, no, I'm sure this can't be it. I'm not supposed to be happy with this. I'm supposed to want more. It has to be different.
Or different.
Yeah. And so it's an important principle to bring in if you are trying poly, that it's going to feel weird at first. And we're here to tell you it's okay. So.
And what I have discovered back to what you're saying about, am I okay? Is this okay? Is there's actually like grief in not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, right? Like, if there's something wrong with me because I'm not doing it that way, even if I'm happier doing it this way. It's a really strange paradox I find myself in. But that also, there's, for me, a requirement of getting comfortable with uncertainty because I am not following a framework, right?
Yeah.
There is no RomCom that has shown me my life's path.
Damn it. We have to
Maybe that's the next thing.
We have to produce a new RomCom. That is totally our next project.
Okay, great. So what that means is that I can be happy and content in what I'm doing right now, and I'm still feeling uncomfortable and uncertain because the path forward is not clear. And so I've had to just get used to recognizing I'm choosing a life that has no framework, that has no map, that has no template. the uncertainty that comes with that is what I'm choosing.
You are. And with uncertainty comes growth. It's really true.
Right.
Sitting in it.
Yeah.
Quite a while. So I'm going to start off by talking about one way to have a poly relationship.
One way that you have done it.
One way to do it.
Yeah. Or at least in our world's experience.
Sure.
Our worldview.
Yeah. It's less teaching, more awakening, right? We are not preaching any particular way. So one way that has worked for me is that I have been married. I've been married since 2005. So nearly 20 years. And I have a boyfriend. And that boyfriend is over 1,000 miles away. We reconnected 6 years ago. And
it was someone that you used to know?
Yes. I had just a very brief interlude with this guy back in 2001. And we reconnected. And I saw him. Sparks flew. We had amazing chemistry. And we definitely still have a very strong physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental connection. And we've also been doing it long distance, right? So we built a relationship over Messenger on Facebook, basically. We did a lot of going back and forth, a lot of talking, a lot of FaceTiming. Phone sex can be amazing, I assure you. It totally works. In the beginning, we only visited maybe twice a year. And then we eventually graduated to visiting every month. So this is a long distance relationship. I am married and I have a 13-year-old daughter. My boyfriend does not have another partner. He is not poly and he has no kids. So he chooses not to date anyone else, does enjoy a lot of his alone time, and knows that I am married, and that's his choice. It's not an easy route by any means, but we have made it work for various reasons. So that relationship for me has been a perfect situation, particularly, I believe, for me, because I've been married for many years and have gone through the marriage doldrums and we have a child and we have to focus on her and there's no time to have sex. And so there was a point when my husband and I became less than excited about each other, I would say. We were both focused on different projects. We were feeling a little lost. And in this poly situation, I have built a relationship with my boyfriend that is largely based on escaping my current life, which can feel very mundane, as we all know. So I always visit him. He doesn't visit me. I fly there. And we have a very predictable weekend, right? We do the same types of things every time I go. We see live concerts, we watch movies, we spend a lot of time in bed, we eat yummy food, maybe we go out to eat, maybe we take a walk at midnight, but we have a very specific routine. And while I'm there, I would say I am surrendering myself, because in my married life, I am in charge of a lot of details. I plan most of our life. I'm running a household with my husband, and it gets stressful, of course.
And you're an entrepreneur.
And I'm an entrepreneur.
And a mom.
And a mom. And there's a lot of details to take care of. And I'm often, as I've joked, I had a picture of Ophelia of dead Ophelia from Hamlet on my wall for many years, because the ultimate surrender really seems like if I could just lay back down and not worry about anything. And so going to my boyfriend's allows me this kind of surrender. And that's what works, right? He hears about my daughter and he's watched her grow up, in pictures. He has met my daughter. He has met my husband. But in general, when I'm there, I am off the grid, right? I'm not tending to the details at home. And I'm really fortunate my husband allows me to do that.
And is capable of handling the household when you're not there.
Absolutely. He takes care of everything. So this is a very specific way to do poly, for sure. And it wouldn't work for everyone. It definitely has worked for me for so many years. But I'm always reevaluating, right? Does this still work for me? Does it still work for him?
Can I ask you a couple questions there? I'm really intrigued by you saying what I do here is I surrender, right? So that there is... It seems like a very specific part of you is getting met when you go visit him. And obviously he's also able to create the container that allows you to surrender, because he must be taking care of things once you're there. But that seems to be as much of the experience of, yes, there's a person here who you're really excited to see, but also here is an experience that you don't get to have in your everyday life.
Great point. Yeah, it is about the experience and it's about him. And I'm very fortunate that he likes to take care of me. I feel so taken care of. And usually I'm caretaking. Of course, you take care of me also. But in general, I'm usually caretaking in my house. And so when I go there, I'm helping, but in general, he's lighting candles and he's lighting incense and he's getting the bed ready and he's doing the laundry and he's making food for me and he's setting up the TV and he's giving me a massage and I'm giving him one too. But we really are on his schedule with his agenda. And that feels like a relief to me. And so I say it's been medicine. It really does feed me in a specific way so that I can recharge and refuel and come back into my life here with love and care and
capacity,
energy. Absolutely.
And so what I'm hearing is that this is like, given that it started so long ago, it started off at maybe, I'm going to say slower pace in terms of the in-person, but that it seems like a part of you ended up getting seen, getting met, coming alive, that, if we think about ourselves, like not everything can happen in the relationship that we have at our home, where Google Calendar and kids' lunches and school plays and all of that is happening. And that a reason why this has worked is because a part of you is more alive.
I think that is absolutely true. And I remember in the beginning, he helped me fall in love with my body again. I didn't hate my body. I wouldn't say I was uncomfortable or that it was an issue, but he helped me see my body again. And I do believe that the distance creates this feeling of scarcity. And every time I see him, I'm never seeing him really more often than every 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes every 4 to 6 weeks. And that scarcity does keep this novelty alive. And that works very well for us too. There are times when it doesn't, of course. We're dying to see each other. It's too long. It hurts. There's some suffering. But I believe it's an amazing story that for 6 years we have kept this novelty. And he also meets me in a way through music, through literature, through meaning, through movies. And
I'm guessing he can like quote movie quotes right back at you.
Yes. Oh, yes.
This is where I do not meet Andrea.
Thank goodness. That's okay. But yes, we could quote movies. We can just watch something and quote the entire thing ourselves, right? We're constantly movie quoting. And he also really appreciates my passion and big energy in life, which I'm just so appreciative of. He sees me big and he really cherishes that part of me. So that's something I was not getting, in my marriage. My husband's amazing, but that's not his thing. And I received that. That is one way that poly can look.
Thank you for sharing. Yay.
So what relationship would you like to talk about?
I think I will talk about the first one. When my husband and I we started non-monogamously, but more in like the swinger sex club kind of realm. And then gradually over time found our way towards emotional connection. And then in poly in that way, like opening our heart to others and allow each of us to open our hearts to others. And we ended up inviting a woman into our relationship with someone that we both knew. The two of them had like a deepening connection, and she was also in a relationship. It had been open before, but it was definitely the first time all of us were going to attempt this. And it ended up being about 5 months. And I jumped in really naively of like, yeah, I'm a fuck yes. Sure, let's try this. My naivete was high, but that is part of also my innocence and joie de vivre about life. I was like, let's just give it a try.
Janelle's a relentless optimist. Yes. And also let's call this bravery and courage and trust.
Yes. And all of those things worked. And what happened was almost immediately for me, probably 3 hours after I said, yeah, I'm a fuck yes, and all of us agreed to it, I was in the shower and ripping my heart out, trying to rip it out because it hurt so much, and discovering through books that like, oh, this feeling of jealousy was so vast. And I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? What did I do? Which then I embarked upon a 5-month relationship with the three of us and her partner, who was in the mix of it all because conversations are always relevant to everyone. And of like the most catalyzing growth and beautiful expansion and painful expansion at the same time. It was the best and the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. Mm-hmm. And I learned so much about myself because I was willing to take this risk of putting the relationship and taking what I knew and saying, okay, I'm going to try something else. We never really got to, in those 5 months, having it be like super dialed in. There was a lot of moving parts. I would say it essentially was a V with my husband in the middle. Mm-hmm. And that they would see each other once a week separately. And then the three of us would see each other every couple of weeks, I would say. And then we did go on vacation together, the three of us, for
I remember that.
My husband's birthday. And so that was, 7 days together in Mexico in several different Airbnbs.
I seem to recall 2 descriptor words that came across the box at that time. Hot and hard.
Hot and hard. Okay.
You were in Mexico, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So let me make sure that I'm clear that you were living with your husband. Mm-hmm. Your husband was seeing his girlfriend. Were you also independently seeing this girlfriend?
Rarely. Like we were friends. We were not seeing each other sexually separately.
Got it. Were you processing with her your feelings?
Triangulation ended up being a thing. Mm-hmm. So we were always trying to navigate that. We were always trying not to triangulate.
Yeah, definitely a challenge. And I also want to point out, to me, like this is a perfect example of us both being poly and me looking at this situation and being like, fuck no. It freaks me out. Not that I will never do it. Who knows? But it feels very brave to me to be meeting with and having a 3 relationship altogether.
Right. Because it involves me like watching my husband have sex with someone.
Right. And not just sex, but like
loving relationship. Right. But me being very involved in a sexual context at times. And then, just like, oh, like now you're upset. Oh, you're not upset with me. You're upset with her. But I am experiencing the upsetness.
Oh my God. So seriously. So, and I think this just in contrast, just to review, my poly has been, I have a boyfriend, I am married, and my husband has a girlfriend, and I know his girlfriend and he knows my boyfriend, but we do nothing, all 4 of us, and we do nothing, 3 of us ever. So that's just how we have set up the container. But there's so many ways to do it.
Right.
And this was very
different, very immersive. Mm-hmm. Like, trips together, medicine journeys together,
going to concerts together. Remember you guys in the back of a truck.
Going to concerts together. So, and so there was definitely fun as well, but just a lot of processing. I think I should also name, there was times that I didn't feel like I was getting enough. Mm-hmm. Right. And so there was, even during that relationship, the idea was, could I find someone else? Mm-hmm. So to add to the polycule situation, right? In which case, then instead of it really being 3, it would have been like 2 and maybe some overlap on occasion. Never got to that, but that was something we were also exploring.
Mm-hmm. And Would you do that again?
At the time, I said no fucking way. But now, do I say never say never? I think what I learned and where I'm at today is I am seeking what I need. And it's harder for me to get my needs met if I am also trying to take care of other people's needs. And so I think the exploration that I'm on, probably for the foreseeable future, which is why I don't think that a scenario like that would ever happen again, is that I'm discovering I want to be the one who gets to decide everything versus waiting for someone else to decide if they want to see me.
I see. And how does this, I missed, what's the connection between what you just said and the situation with your husband and girlfriend?
I was waiting like, oh, did she want to like hang out with the three of us? Or did she just want to hang out with him? Oh, did he want to hang out with the three of us? Or did he just want to hang out with her? It was never of what does Janelle really want to do? I mean, my voice certainly counted.
Yep.
But like, I couldn't like demand something.
So you're a secondary voice. I'm hearing that you say that there was something secondary about, because they had found each other.
Right.
And you were
and I was
already there.
And I was right. And I was important. And this has been my own journey through codependency came through during this time as well, which was realizing I was putting other people's needs ahead of my own.
And I believe if you had this situation again right now, and if it started today as it did then, I think it would go very differently. Right. Your voice wouldn't necessarily be a secondary.
And yes, there's just no way anything. It just would none of this would happen again the way that it did. So, so back to, right. Like, oh, I did that and I might not ever do it again. And it just means I've switched to another degree on the poly dial. Yeah. And exactly. I had that experience. I learned the most. I have so much gratitude towards her. She and I are still friends. I have deep love and gratefulness for all that she taught me and exposed me to.
Amazing.
So
beautiful.
And then the last thing I want to say is that obviously what I just described was my opinion in a 3-person relationship. That I have no doubt that my husband would describe it totally differently and that she would describe it totally differently. So I just want to be really just hitting the point home that everything I just said is my perception of how that relationship was designed and played out.
Yeah. Very important, particularly for the threesome. Right. So just another way that you could be poly, that I was poly for a short time, maybe like 3 months, was met someone online, saw them every 2 weeks, went out on an elaborate date, went back to his house, had great sex, did not text or call in between dates. Only every 2 weeks got together. And, this went on for, 3 to 4 months. And it was great, right? It was just what I wanted, just what I needed, no more, no less. And then it ended, right? So that's one little way to be, to set up a poly situation. That's while I was married and I did not have my other boyfriend at that time. That's one way. And then there's another, which I can only say a little bit about. In my husband's situation, he has a girlfriend. She is local. She lives 15 minutes away. He sees her at least 2 nights a week, sometimes more. And it's very present in our life, right? I don't see her, but definitely the idea that he is with her and he's gone from the house, and it's very present, quite a bit different than my long distance relationship is.
The piece then that I would add is to where I'm at right now, which is neither my husband and I have ever had what you've had. I mean, I remember when you're like, I can't imagine what you're doing. Yeah. I remember talking to you like, I can't imagine what you're doing. Like, it would just seem so foreign to have a boyfriend constantly and like, or a partner. And so there's the recognition of my own limiting beliefs and fears really come into play when getting to what is it that you want? Here you've got you've got a partner, but what else do you want? Who else do you want? What needs are not getting met? And for me, I have been really slow, I would say, in discovering what I wanted. The codependency, which I've already mentioned, has been a factor in that. A note to the audience, right? Like one of the things that I used to do that I do not recommend doing is when my husband would go out on a date, I would stay at home and do QuickBooks.
We forgot that.
Right?
That's the worst idea I've ever heard.
I know.
How did I let you do that? Like,
you didn't. You would tell me every time, why are you doing this? So I was essentially martyring myself, right? Because I didn't have anyone to go out with. And then I had to do this thing. And so like he was out of the house. So it was just like my time to do it. And in hindsight is like the most ridiculous thing. So I was making a hard thing as hard as possible. So I do recommend being gentle with yourself. And if you're the one who's at home and your partner is out, what can you do to nourish yourself? Whether it's talk to a friend, get a massage, take a bath, like go out yourself, whatever. But in the relationship format, you're not always going to be apples to apples, right? Like you happen to have a boyfriend and your husband has a girlfriend. That's not always going to be the case.
yeah. And it wasn't always the case for me. And for a long time, my husband was dating and I had this boyfriend and it was completely imbalanced. And it's imbalanced for my boyfriend because he doesn't have another person and I do. And that it also comes up.
Balance may not be the thing you can strive for.
No, I would say it's great to have, but timing doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah.
And I would say too, the poly format I mentioned where I saw someone, every couple weeks, we didn't text a lot in between. It was really, I would say is emotionally light, but also very satisfying and very pleasurable, but low maintenance. And that is something I've talked about with a good friend of mine who's experienced a similar experience, who's experienced a similar relationship where she continues to freak out and think, this is not healthy. I shouldn't be doing this, right? This doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like other relationships, but yet I really love it and I want to keep doing it. But isn't there something wrong with me that we're not talking more often? Isn't there something wrong with me that he hasn't met my daughter? Isn't there a problem because we're not going away on vacations together? Right. So she's trying to fit this new relationship into her old model. And it's a struggle, basically suffering that we put ourselves through.
Right. I can really resonate to that. And one of the ways that I have freed myself of that is becoming really clear with my desires, my fears, and my boundaries. Knowing them for myself and then being able to vocalize them has really, really been a game changer for me as far as figuring out how to be in relationship with others, including my husband. But so, I mean, this is actually, I think, a tip for monogamous relationships as well. Anyone who's in a relationship with someone else can benefit from this type of communication. But because the question, what is it that you want, right? Sent me down like a multi-year journey of really figuring that out. And a couple of the relationships that I have had, one of them was my first time being with another man. And it was this man's first time being with another woman. His relationship was open as well. And we were just like such gentle, like it was such a soft landing. And I have such appreciation. He and I were only together like a couple of times over the course of a year. But we were kind of like holding each other's hands, right? As we're like, okay, I'm going to do this. This feels really scary. And you feel really safe to do this with.
Right.
And I know that like, I'm attracted to you, but I also know that I don't want a relationship with you. I'm just dipping my toe in and I want to be able to go out on a date and have fun and feel desired, feel appreciated. And I knew my capacity. I'm not actually someone who wants to talk to people very often in between dates. And so I was able to say that. And can you meet me there? Yes. And so he had, married with kids. And so we were able to talk about it. So no one got hurt. We were able to clearly state what we were desiring and then what our boundaries were. And it was a really beautiful way for me to finally like step into what I want, like naming what I wanted and then stepping into it. Another experience that I had, which was a really profound, and I'm saying profound because I discovered that I had placed my permission for my pleasure outside of myself. I was looking for someone else to say it was okay that I
got pleasure,
chose pleasure, what I wanted.
Can you give us you're about to give us an example, I think.
Yeah. So I realized that I had put the permission for my pleasure outside of myself. And there was someone that I met who admittedly, like on paper, is not someone I would have related to. We met in a situation where I was like, oh, like really drawn to him. And it turns out he was going to be leaving Colorado in 2 months. So I actually knew that no matter what happened, that was the maximum amount of time we were going to have together.
Sounds like a dream. I think the finite nature of someone is an interesting
concept. Yeah, it was really powerful. I had never thought about it. I just suddenly found myself in it. And what it allowed me to do was allowed myself to fall really deeply for someone who I might not have allowed myself to fall deeply for, to surrender to what this experience was and to be brave and say to my husband. So prior to this moment, I actually had a really hard time when my husband would spend the night with someone. And it was like always like a negotiation point. And because the witching hour would happen at like 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock or 2 a.m., I would wake up and I would be like, rah, and so that was always really hard. Even though there was nothing wrong with it. Like I just was recognizing that this was hard for me. But then I finally was in a situation where I was getting to experience that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love morning sex.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And so I was able to say, you know what? Like I've got 2 months with this person and I want to be having morning sex with them. And I want to be able to spend the night in order to do that. And so I was able to ask to just tell my husband that. And so coming from a place of my want, not caretaking how I thought my husband would feel, but honoring that, of course, but still being like, I'm stating what I want. And then the absolute like joy and relief of that was amplified because when I came home, I was actually really excited to come home. I was excited. I was just like you had mentioned, I was nourished. I had had like a really fun, like evening. It's been 12 hours. My house doesn't have as many pets and doesn't have other things. And so I was like, I'm ready to go home to my house to see my husband, feeling recharged, feeling nourished, and realizing, oh, that's most likely my husband's experience as well. Right. Where like, I would be nervous that if he spent the night, that meant something. And in the end, I got to experience it for myself and be like, oh, what it meant was I got to be nourished and be excited to come home.
And that's what you wanted. Yeah. And so the relationship format though, what did it look like?
Since it was 2 months, I would say we saw each other like twice a week for about 2 months.
And it was deep and rich, but you knew it was ending. Did you ever think, oh, well, I want to keep in touch even though he's leaving the country? No,
I didn't.
So I think this is an interesting point in that it's something that I have a hard time relating to. I'm not that I couldn't, it may happen to me, but it's hard to fathom in my mind.
Right. But this, I think, is what's so beautiful, right? Is we all are different people. We all have different needs, capacities. And I think one of the phrases that I describe myself with that feels very true is that I feel deeply and hold lightly. And the whole time that we were together, we kept acknowledging that we were such medicine for one another. We were such medicine. And I felt myself healing some of my wounds from being with him. And I know that I was serving him in that way as well. But it was almost like it was a soul contract, right? I actually knew that if it had been longer than those 2 months, that it would have ended up ending sad, and it just wouldn't have continued with the same beautiful intensity that it had and the healing power.
I think this just really speaks to the mindset of poly, right? This is the temporary, impermanent mindset that I am still struggling to adopt. It's like more focused on the present. It's not worried about the escalator and where are we going? Where are we going? What are we doing? And but personality wise, like it's kind of unfathomable. I would say it's incredibly difficult for me to adopt a position in life that's like not thinking about what's next. And so it's been a lot of my growth to stop doing that, right? To stay in the now rather than thinking about where is it going to go? What's it going to look like in 2 months? What's going to happen? Right. So, I mean, I think that is a it's a big lesson I've learned from poly, but also one that I'll probably spend my entire life trying to shift to. So I think what I want to tell listeners is that is a new mindset that could be a transition for you if you're moving to poly. And that if you do have these temporary setups, that you have to be really intentional about your beginning and your ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely had, like, it was a container. We said it. We were intentional in both of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And that's saying up front, which is not what we usually do with stuff, is like, okay, well, it's going to be over at Christmas or, whenever.
Right.
So with this recent poly format where you went out, you had this wonderful time. So how did that end? And what were the next steps, if there were any next steps?
Yeah. How it ended was that we said that it was a really fun time and that we're looking forward to seeing each other again and for our paths to cross again.
Mm-hmm.
In the beginning of the day, we also knew that neither of us planned to text or to communicate with the other in between. If someone has a date idea and wants to reach out, great, but there was no expectation of when and what that would look like. And instead, it was just like, this was just a moment that I was really asking him for the opportunity to practice my pleasure with him in a very set container.
Great.
And he said yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I have such gratitude.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. Would you call it a relationship? But you're not in touch with him now.
Well, I've actually seen him several times since at different parties, but there's no ongoing relationship.
Right.
But he has such a special spot in my heart.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
And so in that regard, I would also just maybe name that he is someone who's solo poly, so has several relationships, and so understood that he had limited capacity to add someone else in. So was honest about that.
Right.
And knew himself not to be monogamous, and also just knew that the bandwidth was an issue.
Right.
So it's just to throw in another relationship format out there altogether with someone who is solo poly.
Mm-hmm. Right. And as a married poly person, you can have another primary or two or multiple relationships, or you can just see who you're attracted to and go run sexual energy, have an experience with them. And there doesn't have to be strings attached, I think is probably one of the main messages, is you need not do that.
Right. In fact, because communication is the foundation for all of this for me, communicating openly and honestly is one of the ways that my nervous system relaxes.
Mm-hmm.
And so had he said, oh my gosh, I've had a crush on you for 2 years. I'm so excited. I would love to be in a relationship with you. I might've been like, you know what? Like, let's leave it at making out. And like, that's, it. Because, or maybe not do anything at all, because that's not where I'm at right now. I know that I have just discovered this about myself. And so I want to be able to go out and run sexual energy with as many people as I want to.
Right. Right. Exactly.
A couple of other relationship formats, not ones that we've necessarily experienced, but that we know of is, and as I've mentioned threesomes a couple of times, like I really enjoy being with women. And so another reason for me to be poly is that it allows me to express that side of myself. Yeah. Right. Outside of the traditional relationship, even though I am married to a man. We would love to hear how you're doing it, because there's so many different ways to do it. So we would love to hear what works for you.
Check us out on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you plug in. Don't forget to rate, review, and rant if you want to. And we'll see you next time.